Welcome to MD Longevity Lab, where we're playing the long game. This is a podcast where science meets real life with expert insights, practical tips, and real-world tools to not only live longer, but live better. Our aim is to radically change the way medicine is practiced and enable individuals to age gracefully, maintaining health span and vitality well into their later years. We're your hosts, Dr. Nisha and Dr. Vikas Patel, physicians, partners in life, and parents balancing work, wellness, and everything in between. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the MD Longevity Lab podcast. Nish, how was your weekend?
It was good. We had your folks visiting and we did a triple generation 5K. So my mom, your mom and dad, us, and our 3 kids. So that was pretty fun.
It was fun. And no one got hurt.
No.
No egos were bruised.
A little bit, but...
Yours?
I mean, it's just slowing down, but still moving.
It was good. It was fun. And we had good weather too.
We did. Nice. It was 70 and sunny. Perfect.
60, like 64 and sunny.
Yeah, by the time we finished, I think it was 70.
Today, we want to cover a topic that we've touched on before. We're going to talk about muscle, really because the investment that we make in muscle compounds over decades, right? So it pays in dividends in all sorts of arenas of our life, including mood, memory, metabolism, obviously mobility, but also mortality. It's counterintuitive that it would have an effect on so many different arenas of our health, but it really does. And that compounding effect really does pay off in the end. So, if we stop contributing to our kind of muscle bank, the principal investment eventually does evaporate. And that's what we're trying to avoid, that we want to try and keep adding or at least sustaining the muscle that we've had, that we've put the work into obtaining, and maintain that for as long as possible in life, because we want to keep realizing the dividends of that work as we get older.
I think the investment analogy is such a good one that all of us can relate to. We don't expect our 401ks to be, robust if we haven't actually put in the work in our 30s, 40s, and 50s towards that. So I think the same goes for muscle. If we are not contributing, decade after decade, we cannot expect to be functional and full of health in our 70s.
And I think it's also, how many times in clinic have we seen patients that are surprised because they are active, they play sports on the weekends, and they feel like, yeah, but I'm so active. But then when we do a DEXA scan, they turn out to be at the 8th percentile for muscle mass for their age group. And they're like, how's this possible?
Are you talking about me? That was the old me.
You were the 9th percentile.
I was about 9th percentile.
Thank you very much.
You know what? I am nipping at the heels of adequately muscled now, so I am no longer under-muscled.
You are no longer under-muscled. That is true.
Just for the record. So several episodes back, I think it was one of our first episodes, we made the case that muscle is the most important organ in your entire body. It affects your endocrine pathways, your metabolic pathways, structural pathways, and obviously your cognitive health. And we laid out why. And today's episode is the follow-up, the how.
So here's kind of why we're doing this episode. There is more conflicting advice about muscle out there than almost any other topic in fitness. Everything from what to eat, how much to lift, how often, how heavy, whether older adults should even be lifting at all, whether they can even actually put on muscle. I think the noise is overwhelming at times, and so much of it can be wrong.
Right. So by the end of this episode, we hope you're going to walk away with a couple things. You're going to know exactly how to preserve the muscle that you already have. You're also going to know what's actually required to put on new muscle if you're in that under-muscled category. And most importantly, you're going to finally understand what progressive overload really means so that you can start incorporating it into your training as soon as this week.
So no fluff, no supplements to sell here. no gimmicks. We're just going to kind of dive into the science here. We're going to start off with a little refresher on why muscle actually matters, especially for some of you that may not have listened to the earlier episode. So if you didn't listen to it, it's probably worth listening to, but we're going to give you a little bit of a recap of this. Muscle isn't just, like a vanity issue. It's actually an endocrine organ, and it actually secretes hundreds of hormones that are called collectively myokines. Every time that we contract muscles, we're secreting some of these myokines. The more muscle that we have, it really associates with a lower cardiovascular mortality, a lower cancer mortality, a lower diabetes risk, lower dementia rates, overall better mood, stronger bones, less frailty, and across the board, longer life, period. I mean, that's like so essential to so many different systems of our body. It's an invaluable part of our life.
Yep. Muscle is the most important organ in your entire body that your insurance is not going to pay for you to maintain. And there's no pill to fix it. You all have got to put in the work. And today we're going to talk about how to maintain muscle and even better, how to grow it.
So, the first metaphor about muscle is really, we kind of touch on this investment idea because it's really the cleanest way to understand the rest of this episode. If you imagine that your skeletal muscle is a retirement account, the principal is your existing muscle mass. The deposits are the resistance training sessions that you do. The interest is the protein and the recovery that you stack on top of those deposits. The withdrawals are the days, the weeks, the months, and really the years that you don't train.
Yep. And the brutal part of that metaphor, the part that nobody wants to hear, is that account has negative interest by default.
You're right. So after about the age of 30, in the absence of you depositing more muscle mass, the account is steadily losing money on autopilot. The default state of the adult human body without resistance training is active depletion of muscle. And this is where that evolutionary lens really helps us understand why. Muscle is metabolically expensive. A pound of skeletal muscle burns roughly 6 calories at rest every single day for as long as you own it. In that Paleolithic environment where there was food insecurity pretty often, that the body really couldn't afford to maintain tissue that it was not using. So evolution built this brilliant and, in today's world, kind of catastrophically maladaptive feedback system. If you're not loading the muscle, dismantle it. The energy is needed somewhere else. And so we're going to take away the thing that's the most expensive for us.
Yeah, and that made perfect sense in an environment where if you weren't using your muscles, it meant food was scarce, survival required conservation, right? Time of famine, you are conserving energy.
It makes zero sense in an environment where food is infinite and you're not using your muscles means you took the elevator instead of the stairs, right? The body really can't tell the difference. It evolved to read low load as one of the famine signals. We've created an environment of basically like permanent perceived famine without the actual famine. So the body that keeps shedding muscle decade after decade in response to a threat that just doesn't really exist in the real world is really the reason why we end up losing muscle mass in the long run.
Oh, yeah. And the math is brutal. After the age of 30, without any intervention, and we'll talk about those interventions in a little bit, most adults lose roughly 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade through their 40s, 50s, and beyond. And that rate of muscle loss accelerates into 60s and 70s. So by the age of 80, the average sedentary American has lost between 30 and 50% of the muscle that they had at age 25.
So that's literally half of your principal that's gone. And it's not because these people are unlucky. It's because they just didn't make any more deposits into their muscle bank.
Yep. Deposits being strength training, right?
Exactly. In our ancestors, it just did not matter because they were constantly loading their muscles. So when food was scarce, their body got rid of the thing that it was not using, which was fat tissue first. Eventually, if food became scarce enough, then of course they would also lose some muscle. But the second food became abundant again, they would pile the muscle back on because they were constantly using it.
Yep. And if you saw your 401k statement that showed negative compounding of 5% per decade, you would lose your mind. I would lose both of our minds for us. But you'd switch financial advisors, you'd write angry letters, maybe 1-star Google reviews. But that exact thing is happening in our bodies silently to our physical retirement accounts if we're not doing anything to put on muscle. And almost nobody is checking that bank statement.
And the consequences of running out of principal are, not financial in this sense, they're biological. There's no way for you to borrow muscle from a bank when you're 78. And you're going to need help to get out of a chair at that point. You have either deposited enough into your account or you haven't. And when you haven't, you fall down, you break hips, you need assisted living or nursing home care.
Yep. So before we get into preserving muscle and building muscle, Vikas, I want to kind of go over a patient story. So why don't you tell us about Bob?
Bob, we've changed his name. Okay. So everything else about Bob is real. 62-year-old guy, successful, retired engineer, came to us about a year and a half ago because his wife kind of pushed him to do this. His exact words on the intake: "I don't really need to be here. I feel fine."
Famous last words.
Yeah, totally. So we did a workup on him, and his cardiovascular metrics weren't great, but they weren't catastrophic. His labs were actually pretty good. The thing that really stopped me cold was that on his DEXA scan, Bob, appearance-wise, looked like a pretty normal weight 62-year-old man. He had a BMI of about 26, a little soft or pudgy, but not fat by any real clinical definition. His DEXA showed that his ALMI, his appendicular lean muscle index, that's the number that we look at and on measurement of muscle mass on a DEXA to tell us how much muscle is on the arms and legs. He was in the bottom 5th percentile for his age and sex.
Yeah. So that means his arms and his legs were almost entirely without meaningful muscle, right? It was just bone and skin. He was, in clinical terms, sarcopenic. He just didn't look like it.
And I won't forget this. When I asked him to stand up from a chair without using his hands, he struggled. Like, it took some effort. Like, he'd gotten so used to pushing up with his arms to get out of a chair that he didn't even think anything about it until someone asked him, "All right, do it just with your legs." So, his grip strength was in the range that I'd expect for someone who was a frail 80-year-old. He was kind of 20 years ahead of schedule on that frailty curve, and he really didn't have any idea, because frailty doesn't really announce itself. It creeps up on you, really like one missed gym session at a time for 30 years. And you don't notice that you're making these subtle adaptations, like pushing off with your hands, or slowing down when you were going upstairs and actually using the hand railing to actually help pull you up the stairs instead of just using your leg strength to do it.
But Bob was very thankful to his wife, as all husbands should be, because we usually look out for you guys. But if he hadn't gotten the workup, it wouldn't have been that reality check of, I really need to change the trajectory of my life, because Bob did not want to be in a nursing home. He didn't want his kids taking care of him. He wanted to be active, travel, enjoy his retirement. I mean, he had been a lifelong engineer, and to be told that, man, you've got very low muscle mass of a 80-year-old, like, we've got to do something about it. So tell us about Bob now. present
So
day.
18 months later, 18 months into a structured strength training program, along with increasing protein intake to work with that structured strength training program. He works out 3 times a week, slow, progressive overload that's supervised. His DEXA scan last month showed that his lean mass had increased by 4.2 kilograms. So that's about 9 pounds of new muscle that he's put on in a year and a half from the age of 62 until 63 and a half. His grip strength has now increased to basically around the normal for his own age group. His resting blood sugar dropped by 14 points. His hemoglobin A1C dropped from 5.9 down to 5.3. He told me at his last visit, and another thing, I'm not going to forget, he said, I feel like I got part of myself back that I didn't even know that I'd lost. And that's pretty powerful.
For sure. Bob's experience is what investment compounding looks like in real time when it comes to muscle. He had nothing in the account, right? He hadn't saved anything in his muscle 401k until the age of 62. He started making consistent deposits and that principal grew. And the dividends, he found benefits in his energy, mood, obviously his labs, his confidence, and those benefits started paying out almost immediately.
And it's never too late to actually open that muscle account. But opening it at 25 or 35 is much cheaper than opening it at 65.
Yep. All right, let's move on. We are going to go into how to preserve the muscle that you already do have. Because before we can grow your muscle account, you have to stop the bleeding first.
So here's kind of a line that we want you guys to memorize. If you are not engaged in some form of progressive overload after the age of 35, you are losing muscle at a rate of approximately 3 to 8% per decade. And that will accelerate after the age of 60, 65.
Yeah. And we're going to get into what progressive overload is because most people think they're weight training, but they're not. But that's 3 to 8% of muscle loss per decade. So memorize that number.
Here's kind of why, nobody told you, right? Like doctors don't traditionally measure this. Your insurance doesn't even pay nor care how much muscle you have. So they're not paying for tests to figure out how strong you are. Your bathroom scale doesn't really necessarily show it accurately. The mirror can kind of show it if you're pretty lean and you can actually see your muscle, but the mirror doesn't really tell you exactly what percentage of muscle mass you have. Truly, what happens when you step on a scale is after the age of 30, 35, your weight may stay neutral, meaning if you weigh 150 pounds, you may weigh at 30, 150 pounds, at 40, 150 pounds, at 50, 150 pounds, and you may feel like I'm doing pretty well because I weigh the same as I did when I was in college. But if you are not doing some type of resistance training program, you're replacing about a half pound of muscle every year with a half pound of fat. And that's where the change in body composition occurs. And you didn't even realize it because one, it's happening so slowly and so gradually. And two, it doesn't necessarily show up in the mirror or on the bathroom scale until quite a bit has changed.
Yeah. And this is why I hear many women say in their 40s and 50s, I weigh the same as I did 10 years ago. So why am I tired all the time? And it's because the form of weight has completely changed. The Toyota Corolla that you started with is now a Toyota Corolla full of styrofoam. I brought up Toyota Corolla because I know that would bother you, but that's the analogy I used. Toyota.
It's a great car. Very reliable.
Good. That's going to be our kids' first car. Not
perfect.
Not the Range Rovers that these kids are driving these days.
Preservation. There's really two pillars to this game, and it is resistance training and adequate protein intake. Both are essentially non-negotiable here.
So let's go over resistance training first. The minimum that meaningfully preserves muscle in the average adult is roughly 2 sessions per week, hitting all the major muscle groups. with a real progressive overload component. So we'll define progressive overload in the next segment because that's pretty much the part that everyone gets wrong.
Note what we didn't say here. Didn't say anything about go do yoga twice a week. Didn't say anything about going for walks or doing Pilates. All of those activities have value, but they do not typically on their own generate the mechanical loading that is required for an adult to preserve long-term muscle mass.
Yeah, you said what you said. I mean, it's true. And I think sometimes people don't want to hear it. I know I didn't want to hear it at the beginning because I had never enjoyed weights before. But I think once people see on their DEXA and that year over year, all right, I have been doing Pilates twice a week and I feel like I'm resistance training. But if you're losing muscle, I mean, that's the data and the data doesn't lie. So I think, that's a hard truth for many of us. I know I had to learn it the hard way. So the second thing is protein. The RDA recommends 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And that we learned was wrong, or rather it was set decades ago to prevent overt deficiency. So that study was done basically to prevent malnutrition. So we know adequate protein does not mean optimal. And it was never set to optimize muscle preservation.
So the government this year did go back and change the RDA, right? So now the RDA does actually say 1.2 to 1.6 grams kilogram of body weight is the right amount of protein for somebody to eat. So if you're just in maintenance, right, you can probably get away with around 1.2 grams per kilogram. If you are trying to put on muscle, you need to be at 1.6 and even as high as 2 or 2.2 grams per kilogram, depending on how much muscle you're trying to put on and how quickly you're trying to put it on. So this is really what is considered adequate, somewhere around 1.2 to 1.6, and at the higher end of that, 1.6 to 2, if you're actually like, I want to build muscle.
And for a normal adult, like a 150-pound adult, that's roughly 110 to 155 grams of protein per day. And most Americans aren't even reaching half of that amount.
So distribution does matter here. So you can't really bank this. Muscle protein synthesis gets triggered by hitting this thing called a leucine threshold of about 3 grams per meal. So this basically works out to trying to get at least 30 or 40 grams of protein per meal, 3 to 4 times a day. You can eat more than that and your body will use it. So if you eat a steak dinner today that has 55 grams of protein, you're fine. Your body will use all of it, but you should be trying to get a minimum of 20 to 30 grams in a meal to hit that leucine threshold so that your body is staying in the mode of protein synthesis.
Yep. So if you're covering those 3 meals a day, each one of them has to have a real protein anchor. Eggs and yogurt at breakfast, chicken and beans at lunch, salmon or chicken again, lentils at dinner. So every single meal really has to have that protein component.
And just a quick caveat, especially for the women, protein needs do go up for women, especially in perimenopause and menopause, as estrogen withdrawal makes muscle less responsive to protein. And that's a phenomenon called anabolic resistance. Women in midlife often need to push towards the upper end of those protein ranges, closer to the 2 grams per kilogram. And they honestly have to train harder also just to stay even keel.
Perimenopause is a real kick in the pants.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Mother Nature is not kind to you.
No. Thanks for acknowledging it. That means a lot.
It's Mother Nature's fault.
I know.
She's a mother.
Well, now we're going to blame the women again. Here we go again. All right. No, the bar gets higher for women when life gets busiest, right? We've got kids running around in high school. We've got to get them into college. And it's unfair that in the busiest time of our lives that our biology just kind of lets us down.
I agree. So preservation, remember, it's 2 strength training sessions a week, full body with compound movements, utilizing multiple muscle groups with one movement pattern, progressive increase in resistance, and there is that protein floor that most people are not hitting that they need to, and that is the floor. Those 2 sessions a week have to be, if you're going to work out hard the way that we are going to discuss, you can get away with 30 to 35 minutes of really hard lifting for 2 sessions a week. Considering there's 24 hours a day times 7 days a week, if you're only investing 60 minutes in an entire week to resistance training, you better make them count, because that is the floor of what you can get away with and maintain muscle mass.
And here's a hard truth. Maintaining muscle after the age of 35 is actually a win in and of itself. Most people are losing muscle after the age of 35. So even staying the same year over year, you are ahead of the population. We had a patient and she was in her 40s. I think her first year of her DEXA, she was under muscled and had put on 5 pounds of muscle in a year. And her next DEXA, she was expecting to see that amount of gain and she stayed about the same. And she was really discouraged, but we educated her, while the rest of the women your age have been bleeding muscle, you have maintained it. So that's a win.
Yeah. So, if you think about it on a DEXA scan, we're comparing you to one, I guess we're comparing you to your last DEXA, but really we're comparing you to the general population, that is in your cohort, the same age and sex as you. So on average, people's muscle mass is decreasing as time goes on. And if yours stays exactly the same, if your ALMI is 8, and it stays 8 for 15 years, well, you may have gone from the 50th or 60th percentile for muscle mass. And after 15 years, you may be at the 85th percentile because the rest of the population declined and you stayed exactly the same. So even if you were always kind of skin and bones and your peak muscle mass when you were 30 years old was the 25th percentile for the population, if you maintain the 25th percentile for the population for the rest, or that corresponding ALMI, which I'm just making up numbers here, but maybe that ALMI is 7.2, and you maintain 7.2 meters squared per kilogram for the rest of your life, you're going to end up winning because everyone else is decreasing. And by the age that from 25 to 65, you may have gone up to the 50th percentile while your cohorts all went down.
Yeah, that's a win.
Win.
You set the curve.
That's right.
All right. So this brings us nicely to the offensive game, which is how to build muscle. And we're going to get into progressive overload here. So progressive overload is the single most important concept in resistance training. And it's the single most misunderstood concept in resistance training too. And the reason most people who say, I work out, I'm fit, are not actually building muscle.
So here's kind of a simple version. Your muscles only grow when you ask them to do something that they currently can't quite do. So if you work out the exact same workout with the exact same weights for the exact same reps for the next 10 years, your body will adapt very quickly to that workout, really in about 6 weeks, and then you stop adapting. You will be working out, and working out is good. You will probably just preserve the muscle that you have. You will not build any new muscle because you are not asking your body to do anything differently than what it is doing. It is meeting the need with the current workout that you're doing.
Yep. And this is the fundamental mistake that people make in most gyms across America. They have a routine, a set routine that they do. They do their routine. They feel a little sore and they feel like they're working really hard. And they are, but they're not progressing.
To be fair, they're only sore in that first 6 weeks. Once they've kind of gotten used to the routine, they no longer get sore. Maybe they'll get sore if they went on vacation for 2 or 3 weeks or they got ill. They'll be sore for 1 or 2 workout sessions, and then their body is back to wherever it was. So working out and progressing are two different things. Working out is kind of like a hobby, and progressing is basically an investment.
So, what does progressive overload actually mean? It means that each workout or each week that you're working out, you are asking your body to do slightly more than the last time. And there are 5 ways to make that happen, to make that workout a little bit harder. And as long as you're using at least one of them every single session, you guys will be in good shape.
So the first one, essentially add more weight, right? This is probably the most obvious. It's if you last week squatted 95 pounds for 8 repetitions, and then this week you're going to do 100 pounds for 8 repetitions. So that one makes sense.
All right. Number 2, you're going to do more reps instead. So last week you did 8 reps with that same weight of 95 pounds. This week you're going to do 9 or 10 reps, right? So that's easy. More reps, same weight.
Third, you can add more volume in the form of doing more sets, right? So if last week you did 3 sets, this week you're going to do 4 sets. So that's more total volume.
Number 4, you're going to have better form. So you're going to do the same weight, the same reps, but you're going to do a deeper squat, a more controlled tempo, and you're going to pause at the bottom and you're going to keep that time under tension. I can't tell you how many times I see people at the gym, and it's great. They're working out, they're in their 60s, but when they're doing a squat, it's just a partial movement. And if I could just get them to go down like an inch further, but I can't say anything.
It's not, they don't have to go down further, right? So the issue here is not that they need to go full range of motion. The issue is if you're trying to increase the amount of work you're doing, right? These are the levers that we can pull on. So if you were only doing 25% of the range of motion of that movement, and let's say you don't want to increase the weight, you don't want to increase the volume, you can increase the range of motion. So there's been studies done on, is one more effective than the other, doing 50% of the range of motion or doing 75% of the range of motion. And yes, there is a slight benefit to doing 75% versus 50%, but it's in the setting of how much total volume and total weight are you using. If you don't want to change the weight and the number of sets that you're doing or the number of repetitions, then you can make the deeper squat, right? You can go the full range of motion. So the last one is basically doing a little bit less rest between your cycles, right? So you're not allowing full recovery of your muscle, and you're going to do the same weight, the same reps, but instead of taking 5 minutes between sets, you're going to go down to 1 minute between sets. Your muscles end up having to work harder because they are still somewhat fatigued.
Cliff Notes version of progressive overload: more weight, more reps, more sets, better form, or less rest. Pick one. We don't care which one, because there's a lot of people that say, I don't want to lift heavy or my back hurts, but there are plenty of ways to do progressive overload. So pick one, use it, track it, repeat it. And that's the entire progressive overload game.
I think this is probably where people fail, right? They're not tracking what they're doing. They're just showing up to the gym. They feel how hard things are, and then they kind of wonder why nothing's changing. It's because they're not really tracking, well, last week I did this many sets at this many weights with this many reps. And this week I'm doing the exact same thing. And next week I'm doing the exact same thing. If you're not tracking it, then you're not going to be able to remember that I need to do 2 more reps per set.
Yeah. And you can have a simple notebook. You can track it on your phone, spreadsheet, a training app. It doesn't matter. But last week's numbers should be in front of you or at the forefront of your mind when you're working out. So this week, just beat one of them. That's it.
Now we'll kind of get into what to actually do. The foundation should be these compound movements. And if you don't understand what compound movements are, they are movements that are utilizing multiple muscle groups at the same time. This is how you can work out for 30 minutes and get a good full body workout in, because if you're sitting there and just doing curls, great. You just worked out your biceps. You worked out one muscle group. If you're working out and you have to basically do these compound movements, and compound movements are movements that are involving multiple muscle groups with one movement pattern. So as opposed to an isolation exercise, like if you do bicep curls, it's great. It's a great exercise, but you basically only worked out one muscle group and you took time to do that. If you only want to put in the minimum 1 hour a week, so 2 strength training sessions for 30 minutes, you have to be more efficient with the exercises that you do. So instead of doing a bicep curl and only working out one muscle group, you can do rows, which are working your biceps, your forearms, and your upper back at the same time. And so that's what compound movements are. They're movement patterns that are basically allowing you to hit multiple muscle groups at the same time.
So we're going to go over 5 real quickly, and that's squat, hinge, push, pull, and carry. Do you want to run through those?
So perfect. So squatting is just kind of, what you picture. It's literally from standing height, bending your knees and trying to keep your back as straight as possible as you're doing it. But you're bending down towards the ground and you're standing back up. And initially, if you're inexperienced, you're going to do that just body weight squats, where you'll put your arms out in front of you for balance and get used to that movement pattern. Eventually, you can load with either holding weights in your hands or putting it on a barbell on your back. There's multiple ways to do this, but that's the first basic movement pattern.
And if you want to get up out of bed or be able to sit on a toilet and get back up when you are 75, this exercise is crucial.
You would be surprised how many people call 911 because they're on the toilet and they cannot get up off of the toilet, and their family member cannot help them get up off the toilet. We get patients come into the ER all the time saying, I sat down on the toilet and I did not have the strength to get up and I had to call 911, and they thought it's best for me to get checked out in the ER. And sure enough, they've lost enough muscle strength and they are fighting off a UTI or something, and they just don't have the strength to get up.
All right, let's move on to hinge.
Hinge. So hinging is basically bending at the hips. You've heard of somebody talking about doing deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts. Basically what you're doing is you are bending at the hips and you're, again, keeping your back flat. You're not rolling over your back. You're keeping your back flat and you're pushing your butt backwards. There's variations. You can do it with a straight leg. You can do it with a slight knee bend as you go down, but it's basically bending down to pick something up off the ground and pull it back up, not where you're doing most of the lifting from bending your knees, but actually most of the bending is coming from hinging at your hip joint, where you're pushing your butt backwards as you lean forwards to get something. So again, practicing this with your back straight and hinging down until you can feel like you've got the good form, and you can do that looking at yourself in the mirror. Then you can do it with holding something in your hands, individual dumbbells or one dumbbell that you're holding in front of you. Eventually you can graduate to doing a barbell if you want. There's various types of barbells that allow you to carry weight more safely so that you're not straining your back. And that's a perfect thing to have a trainer teach you how to use properly. But that's one of the most important. Those two exercises, the squatting pattern and the hinge pattern, are the most important exercises for us once we hit age 60 and beyond.
And it's how many patients do we have, myself included, that have joint pain, right? And we have so many patients, back pain, hip pain, knee pain. One of the best things you can do for any kinds of these arthritic pains is put on muscle. If that joint is under duress, that joint is doing way too much work. And by you putting on a little bit of muscle around that joint, you are giving that joint support. So I know it's counterintuitive. A lot of people are like, I can't lift weights because I have arthritis and it hurts. And my philosophy is, it's going to hurt either way, right? And there's no one that's going to be, I have autoimmune hip arthritis and it's brutal. If I don't lift weights, there are days where I literally cannot get in and out of my car because the arthritis is so bad. But putting on some muscle has really ensured that I'm supporting my joint, that even on those flare-up days, I'm still able to function.
There's multiple mechanisms involved here, but the studies basically uniformly say the exact same thing. People who have documented diagnosed arthritis, whether it's in their knees or their back or their hips, who undergo a strength training regimen with progressive overload, uniformly, there's basically no study that I've even seen where people say their pain got worse. The worst case scenario is people say their pain was neutral, stayed exactly the same, but they gained strength. And the vast majority of studies all show that people report decreased pain and increased function. It's counterintuitive. How could doing more exercise end up causing less pain in the long run? It's because of those myokines, right? So one, building more muscle, stronger ligaments, stronger tendons, stronger muscle is an insurance policy. It provides the initial cushion and it makes sure that your bones are tracking in the right pattern when they are moving. Two, those myokines, the enzymes that your body secretes are anti-inflammatory, and they have an overall anti-inflammatory effect on those joints that are typically inflamed from arthritis.
Yep. All right, let's move on to push, pull, and carry.
So pushing is pretty easy, right? This is typically first we're pushing horizontal to us, right? So pushing away from the body. That is your basic push-up. It's also what people do with various forms of bench press, whether it's just normal bench press, decline bench press, incline bench press. You can do so many different variations with dumbbell, single arm dumbbell push in a horizontal plane. That's the basic movement for pushing in that plane. Then there's pushing above our head as well. And pushing above our head for people who have shoulder problems, which I have shoulder problems. I have labral tears in both my shoulders and I've had surgery on one of my shoulders. There is a proper form to doing it. It is not having your arms out at 90 degrees. It's actually having your arms out at about 45 degrees when you're pushing up. So, and kind of pinching your shoulder blades back to keep as much space open underneath your shoulder blades as possible when you're pushing up. So again, this is where a trainer is very helpful to be able to teach you once or twice the right way to do these pushing movements for both pushing straight out in front of you and pushing up over your head. So that covers the push. The pull is the exact same movements and opposite, right? So pulling down towards us works all of our lat muscles in our back. And then pulling in towards us works the backs of our shoulders as well as our lats. So the entire mid and upper back is worked out with those two movement patterns.
And the last one, carry.
Carry. Oh, and I should say, I'm sorry, I didn't say. So those patterns where we're pulling in either direction, we're working our biceps, our forearms, as well as our back. The pushing ones, we're working our triceps, and the front, our pectoralis major muscles, and then our shoulders that are allowing us to go up. So now carry is really, really important for core strengthening because if you think about it, right, like we are meant to carry load. And it's one of those things that really helps us in preserving our balance and preserving our bone density over time. So if you're loading your spine by actually carrying heavy loads, then your vertebra and your spine have to stay strong. They never go through that osteopenia where if you fall down, you get a compression fracture, right? So everybody has someone in their family that will say that, oh yeah, when I was younger, I was 6 foot tall, and but now I'm like 5'11" or 5'10" and a half. It's because over time their vertebra have actually shrunk, and the discs between their vertebra have actually shrunk. If they were good about about learning how to carry load, right? And one of the classic exercises for that is like doing a farmer's carry, where you're just carrying something heavy in both of your hands. You can do it in just one hand, which will help with some core strengthening on the opposite side of your body, and then alternate to the other hand. If you're walking with weight for, you know, pick a distance, 50 meters, or you can time it 30 seconds, and then progressively using heavier and heavier loads, you're going to actually end up strengthening the joints that are the most important. The bones of your hips, the muscles around your hips, the muscles around your abs and your lower back, which are so key for as we get older, whether we are able to prevent ourselves from getting back injuries, back pain, and prevent us from losing balance where we end up falling. When you're doing that, especially an asymmetric load where you're holding something heavy in just one hand and walking for 50 meters, right? You have to use an asymmetric load on your body to strengthen core that really helps your balance. And so these are really important movement patterns.
Yep. That's it, guys. That's the resistance training menu: squat, hinge, push, pull, and carry. So if your weekly training hits all of those 5 movement patterns twice a week, right? You are doing 90% of what matters. And critically, machines are not shameful, right? If you're new, post injury, just starting, or don't feel safe on your own carrying a barbell, machines are an excellent way to load those patterns. So your muscles don't know whether it's being loaded by a barbell, a bench press, dumbbell, cable, a machine, or a sandbag. It just knows it's being loaded.
I will add, I throw in there with the carry. I also throw in the other core movements, right? So you can look these up online, but how to do proper planks and how to do things like bird dogs. Those are just core muscle in your abdomen and back. And those exercises are very easy to do. You don't have to have any equipment to do them. And for people who don't have equipment, these are exercises they can do at home over 10 minutes, and they're so protective from a chronic back pain standpoint. So I want to get into kind of some of the specifics of the now that we know, the different movement patterns, how frequently should we actually be exercising? So really, we mentioned this, that the minimum amount that you can get meaningful time under tension for your muscles is 2 sessions a week. And so the optimal is probably 3 or 4 if you're really trying to build muscle, but you can get away with as little as 2. I try to get most people, if they are on the edge of that sarcopenia, I say, and let's say their cardiorespiratory fitness is okay, I'll say, we're going to focus more on strength training. I want you to do 3 sessions a week of, call it 45 minutes of strength training. And maybe once or twice a week, you're going to do some cardio, just so you don't fall off there. But let's focus really on 3 days a week of that strength training. You can do this in phases. If then after 6 months or 4 months, you want to do the 3 days of cardio and 2 days of strength training, that's also fine.
Yep. But remember, anything below twice a week per muscle group, you're probably closer to maintaining muscle than actually growing muscle. And if you're not doing it correctly with progressive overload, you could even be losing muscle, but quietly thinking that you're putting on muscle or maintaining it. And let's go over how hard each set should be. And that's generally harder than most people are training. The literature is pretty clear that if you need to take sets to within 1 to 3 reps of failure to maximize hypertrophy, which is muscle growth. So if you finish a set and you could have done 5 more reps with pretty decent form, you probably didn't do enough. And that set, we wouldn't necessarily count as a strength training session.
It's not adding deposits to your muscle bank. Movement is good. It's not a waste of time. Like, any time that you're moving is good for you, but are you actually hitting your goal, which is, I was trying to put on muscle, or I was trying to preserve muscle. If you're not getting into that 1 to 3 reps of failure, you're going to miss the mark. And that's uncomfortable, right? When you think about why it's uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable because we're trying to fit in the minimum dose of resistance training in a week to give you as much benefit as possible. Our ancestors did not have to do the minimum dose because they were always active. Their muscles were always being taxed on a daily basis. So they didn't have to worry about like, I need to push to near failure every day because they were working at 60 to 85% of their capacity every day of their life. That was required by survival. So they didn't have to get all the way to 95% because it wasn't necessary because they were always moving. We don't have that luxury. We're trying to say, okay, I can do 30 minutes or 40 minutes, 2 or 3 days a week. Considering there's 24 hours on just one day times 7, like we're going to put in an hour and a half of work in an entire week to maintain our body. We have to go pretty close to failure.
That's a really good point. And that truth is uncomfortable, but it's the truth.
It hurts. That's
Yeah.
why it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So let's go over the recovery piece. Sleep is when muscle is actually built. So you definitely need the rest. Your training is a signal and the food is the raw material, but sleep is that construction crew. If you are sleeping 6 hours a night and training hard, you will get hurt before you grow. So make sure you're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah, non-negotiable. The training stimulus that you put in during the daytime, you don't get all that sore, right? So even if you worked out really hard, you may get a little stiff. You know that you worked out, but it's after you go to sleep, you notice that the next day that you wake up a little sore. And that's because at night, when you went to bed, your body actually turned on its inflammatory pathways to start to repair the muscle tissue. That's what brings the soreness. And it's when it's done with that process, the muscle is stronger than it was. The little micro tears that you make in the muscle actually repair more robust, allowing you a higher capacity of work to be able to do the next time that you try and exercise.
And one final note on growth of muscle, it's pretty slow. So be patient. Even with near perfect training, perfect protein intake, and perfect sleep, the average adult builds maybe 0.5 pound to 1 pound of muscle per month in their first year of serious training. And after year 1, that number drops sharply. I know that happened to me. The first year I started training, I was like, cool, I put on 5 pounds of muscle. And then every year since then, it's been sometimes just maintaining. Other times I've put on 0.5 pound of muscle the entire year. So it's not as epic growth as it was the first year.
It's definitely for the untrained athlete, which all of you who are going to do this are athletes. For the untrained, you will make significant gain in that first year of your resistance training, and then you plateau. Then gain becomes harder. It's still worth it to keep trying to make the gain, but it will be slower, and you should not get frustrated because even if you put on 5 pounds of muscle in the first year of your training and you only put on 1.5 pounds of muscle in the second year of training, you still made a huge investment. You actually netted the gain and you had no loss.
Yep. All right. So let's move on to a reality check. For our listeners who are in their 50s, 60s, or 70s and listening to all of this thinking it's way too late for me. It's not. Okay, guys, you heard it first. It is not too late. It is never too late. It might be a little bit harder, but it is never too late.
There's this phenomenon in older patients and older muscle tissue called anabolic resistance. Older muscle is gram for gram a little bit less responsive to both training and protein than younger muscle. The same workout that builds, that 1 pound of muscle in a 30-year-old might only build 0.4 pounds in a 65-year-old.
And that means two things. One, it really is harder to build muscle as you age. And number two, while the response of putting on muscle is still there, it's just dampened or muted. So older adults can absolutely put on muscle. The literature is unambiguous on this. The only question is whether they will do the harder work that's required. And that protein requirement goes up, and older adults probably need closer to 2 to 2.2 grams per kilogram per day to overcome anabolic resistance. And I can tell you, most women that I talk to in their 70s aren't getting 200 grams of protein a day.
Correct. It's unequivocal. I mean, every single study that has ever looked at senior citizens and resistance training, every one of them uniformly shows that if they're doing proper progressive overload and they're eating proper, they all gain strength. The muscle mass that they gain is slower than the 25-year-old, but the percentage strength gains are about the same. So while you may not be gaining muscle mass as quickly as you did when you were a kid, the amount of strength that you're gaining is not that far off, whether you're at 25 or whether you're at 75. So strength is what ends up mattering. We're using muscle as a proxy for how strong you are. We care, can you get up off of the toilet? Can you get yourself up this flight of stairs carrying 10 pounds, right? The strength is what matters the most, and we're using muscle mass as a proxy here. So something to listen to, kind of closely here is that, there's this like myth that in older adults, that in the fitness idea that heavy weights aren't safe for them, and they need to be more careful. Truly done correctly with progressive overload and supervision, heavy weights aren't just safe, like they're probably the single most important intervention to preserve independence going into later life. Light weights and higher repetitions, which, we used to think of as called toning, that's not necessarily what older muscle needs. It needs load, real load, and it needs progressive overload. So if you want to go to lower weights and higher reps, you're going to have to make sure that you're doing enough reps that you still feel fatigue. You still have to get to that point where you feel like, okay, I still only have 1 to 3 reps left in the tank here if you put a gun to my head. I want to kind of get this evolutionary point out there, and I know I keep bringing these things up. There is no precedent in human history for a population of inactive 70-year-olds, like zero. Across every traditional society that we've ever studied, hunter-gatherers, traditional farming communities, pastoralists, older adults remain physically engaged with the world right up until they actually could not. And they might not have been able to because of injury or infection. But that's basically what people died of up until, the last 150, 200 years. So they were able to carry their grandkids. They were able to tend livestock. They were able to walk 6 to 12 miles a day. They were loading their muscles with real world tasks until the day they died. This phenomenon of a 7-year-old who hasn't really lifted anything heavier than their coffee mug in the last 20 years, like in evolutionary terms, that's brand new. That's something that modern society and the modern world has brought. It was not there in the past 200 million or 202 million years of our evolution. And our bodies have not adapted to this recent framing of we don't do stuff. So we have to give our body that dose of what it has always done. Otherwise, it's going to dismantle the unused tissue.
That's a really good point, which means that older adults who pick up a barbell at age 70, they're not doing something exotic. They're basically returning their body to a pattern that their body expected pretty much the entire time for the last 2 million years.
Yeah, and I always go back to the data, right? It's extraordinary here. People in their 90s in research trials have demonstrated meaningful muscle gains and functional improvement with progressive resistance training. That's people in their 90s. The muscle never stops responding entirely. We just stop asking it to.
Cliff notes for that. It's never too late. So get started, even if you're 80 and listening
Wherever
to this.
you're at right now, get started.
All right. So let's move on to the next segment. We're almost at the end, guys. Quick list of things that do not build muscle or preserve muscle. So we're going to break some myths.
Cardio alone. So running, cycling, swimming, wonderful exercises in their own right for cardiovascular health, all essential exercises, but essentially useless for muscle building. Some forms can even accelerate muscle loss in older adults if they're not done with proper resistance training to balance it out.
Number 2, supplements without training. Creatine works. Vikas and I both take it. Whey protein works as a protein supplement, as a food source. Almost every other muscle building supplement is either useless or pretty much a rounding error, but none of these supplements work without your body receiving the stimulus to do it. So you can't just take creatine and expect muscle to grow. That's not how it works. You've got to give your body the signal that it needs to lay down muscle. And yes, the creatine can kind of be the icing on the cake for that, but you can't take creatine, not lift, and expect to be healthy.
Same thing for peptides, right? Peptides without training, peptides that are marketed for muscle health. So you can, call back to a previous episode that we did on BPC157, MK677, all the IGF and HGH analogs. The data on these is kind of thin, the opposite, the data on lifting heavy things is pretty overwhelming. You have to remember that even if the peptide works, it does not just magically put on muscle. Your body still needs to give the signal that I am trying to do work in order for the peptide to do its thing in helping you build extra muscle. It might make it a little bit easier if you're giving it the stimulus, but without the stimulus, you're wasting money on something that may not even work and potentially could cause you harm.
And just to piggyback off of that, it's not a supplement, but the number of dudes that are on testosterone but aren't lifting, it's insane. I don't know. It's just like spending money on beluga caviar and just letting it spoil. So still, you cannot take testosterone and expect your body to put on muscle. You have to give your body that stimulus and that signal that it needs to lay down muscle. Let's move on to GLP-1s without resistance training. And this one is critical. If I had a nickel for every patient that was on a GLP-1, we'd be retired.
If you had a nickel for every time you said, if I had a nickel?
Yeah, I say that a lot. If I had a nickel for every time you forgot to pick up the kids or groceries, I'd also be retired.
You'd have like 25 cents.
Listen, anyway. But no, so many people are on these GLP-1s and they're transformative. They're great for metabolic health. There's more and more data coming out, but we have never had a medication like this that can break down muscle with this speed. We are not anti-GLP-1. They genuinely work for what they're designed to do, but we have seen exponential muscle loss in patients that aren't doing proper resistance training while being on a GLP-1. They are thrilled that the scale is going down, and half the time they're losing 1 pound of muscle for 1 pound of fat. So it's just crazy to me to go into a GLP-1 blind without doing a full body DEXA scan and making informed choices, because you'd rather be a few pounds heavier on the scale and retain that muscle than truly bleed muscle dry.
Yeah. And again, it's not that GLPs are evil, right? They are wonderful technology. They are the perfect tool for so many different people. It just needs to be used right. And the appetite suppression is very real on a GLP. And if you're in a big enough calorie deficit, there is no way for you to retain muscle without fixing your protein intake and fixing your training stimulus by resistance training. And people who are on GLPs need to do both of those things.
When people lost weight on a GLP-1 without serious resistance training, those 3 sessions a week and adequate protein, they're losing somewhere between 25 and 40%. That weight can be muscle mass. So it's not fat. It's muscle, bone, connective tissue, the stuff we actually need.
So that's really like, a catastrophe dressed up as success. The patient, steps on a scale, they see the number drop, and they celebrate. But a DEXA scan, if anyone bothers to actually do one, would tell them a different story about what's really happened here.
Yep. And let's touch on less muscle mass. We know means lower resting metabolic rate, and your lower metabolic rate means easier weight regain when the medication eventually stops. So less muscle also means worse glucose disposal, which is the exact problem with the GLP-1s when they're prescribed in the first place. You are in effect trading a short-term weight loss for long-term metabolic issues.
So if you're on a GLP or thinking about one, some of these rules are non-negotiable. You have to resistance train 3 days a week. You have to do the protein minimum 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, probably closer to 2 grams per kilogram. Without those two things, you are using a very powerful drug that honestly will liquidate some of your physical assets.
All right, so let's move on to our 5 practical takeaways. These are direct deposits into your muscle account that we will be starting this week. Right, guys?
All right. Number 1, figure out your body composition, right? Get a DEXA scan if you can. Even get the bioelectrical impedance scale if you can't do a DEXA. You should know how much principal there is in your checking account.
Yep. Number 2, hit your protein goal at every meal. Aim for at least 30 grams of protein per meal, 3 times a day. Track it for 1 week. And most people are stunned at how far below that threshold they're operating. I think that's what you did. You didn't tell me, like, you were a very smart husband. You weren't like, you're doing this wrong. You're like, just why don't you track your protein for a week? And I was getting, I don't know, 40 grams an entire day.
Sometimes. No, I mean, American diet, generally people are getting, 80 grams. Most people are getting 80, 100 grams, but
I wasn't. The week that I was tracking, I was like, oh boy, this is bad.
we eat a fair amount of meat, but considering like what the goal is, people are not getting the amount that they actually need for what the long-term goal is. And that's the problem. Okay. Number 3, resistance train, right? So resistance train, at least 2 to 3 times a week, at least 30 minutes a session, compound movements over isolation movements, squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, planks. If you have never lifted, you definitely need to get a couple training sessions in, or at least be very diligent about looking up YouTube videos and have somebody who knows what they're doing coach you through how to properly do these movement patterns so that you're not injuring yourself. Honestly, dollar for dollar, probably the best money you can spend is to get a trainer to actually show you what to do, so that they can at least design a workout plan for you. And after 5, 6, 7 sessions, you'll be on your own.
Number 4, make sure you track your numbers. Use a notebook, an app, your phone, whatever. If you don't know what you lifted last week, you cannot progressively overload this week. So if you're not tracking, you're not investing.
The 5th one is honestly thinking about reframing this idea that muscle is the asset that you're looking for. Treat it like a retirement account. Make regular deposits to your muscle. Do not skip months. Compounding only works if you don't quit.
Right. That muscle health account belongs to you. So the deposits that you make belong to you, and the dividends belong to you. It does benefit your family because if you put in the work, your family's not going to be taking care of you either. You won't be frail. You're not going to end up with a hip fracture. So make sure you open that account, fund it, protect it, and compound it.
So just in closing here, after age 30, without resistance training, you are going to lose 3 to 8% of your muscle mass per decade. By 80, you have half of your muscle mass gone. So maintenance of muscle after 35 is a win. Growth after 50 is like hitting the jackpot.
Yep. And that mechanism that we talked about is progressive overload, doing either more weight, more reps, more sets, further movement every single session. lift heavy things, make sure you guys are eating real protein, get your sleep, track your numbers, and compound the gains.
It's honestly one of the best investments you'll ever make into your body, especially the body that has to carry you for all of life, right?
Thank you guys for tuning in. Please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you follow Vikas' Substack.
Subscribe to our podcast.
Yeah, like and follow and share.
Please send us messages if there's topics that you want us to cover.
Yep. All right. Take care, guys.
Thank you for playing the long game with MD Longevity Lab. You can visit us at www.mdlongevitylab.com to learn more about how we can support you on your journey. Stay connected with us on social media at MD Longevity Lab for tips, updates, and behind-the-scenes insights. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you subscribed, left us a rating, or shared it with someone you know who's also playing the long game. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.